The Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, he came out of the box earlier today swinging and ready to shoot down the massive lie that has been pushed endlessly by the Democrats and, of course, the Destroy Trump media about so-called Trump-Russian collusion, despite no evidence to this point. It has up to now been a complete and utter lie and a total fabrication. So when the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, was pressed about it by the Democrats, well, guess what? He punched back hard in a major way. Watch this.
I was your colleague in this body for 20 years, at least some of you, and and the suggestion that I participated in any collusion, that I was aware of any collusion with the Russian government to hurt this country, which I have served with honor for 35 years, or to undermine the integrity of our democratic process is an appalling and detestable lie.
Now, good for the Attorney General, and he wasn't finished, because once again, despite no evidence of so-called Trump-Russia collusion, the Democrats, they still continue to push this baseless black helicopter conspiracy theory. Take a look at this testy exchange between the Attorney General and liberal Senator Ron Wyden.
Mr. Comey said that there were matters with respect to the recusal that were problematic and he couldn't talk about them. What are they?
Why don't you tell me? There are none, Senator Wyden. There are none. I can tell you that for absolute certainty. This is a secret innuendo being leaked out there about me, and I don't appreciate it. And I've tried to give my best and truthful answers to any committee I've appeared before. And it's really, people are suggesting through innuendo that I have been not honest about matters, and I've tried to be honest.
All right, checkmate. Now, what's so disgusting about all of this is that Democrats, including some who are actually on this Senate Intelligence Committee and were actually questioning Jeff Sessions today, have admitted themselves no evidence of collusion. Now, since some of these Democrats are so partisan that they have forgotten, let us remind them of their own words.
Do you agree with this conclusion that the president has reached that there was no evidence of collusion?
You know, we haven't seen any of that whatsoever, George. We've been looking and showing everything that they possibly have. That has not led to that.
The last time we spoke, Senator, I asked you if you had actually seen evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians, and you said to me, and I'm quoting you now, you said, not at this time. Has anything changed since we spoke last?
Well, no, it hasn't.
I know we need to go soon, but just to be clear, there has been no actual evidence yet.
No, it has not been.
Okay,
no, it has not.
Wow. So despite the fact that all those prominent Democrats have been forced, based on the facts as we know them, based on the evidence, to say no Russian collusion, no evidence at this time, well, many on the left and in the Destroy Trump media, they're still running completely insanely wild with the completely false conspiracy theory. Now, that just proves what we have been telling you on the show all along. This is not about getting to the truth, finding answers, finding out what the facts are. The Democrats, members of the liberal mainstream media, they don't care about any of that. Why? Because their goal, if we're going to be blunt and honest, is to destroy and discredit President Trump now by any means necessary. And in this case, that means embarrassing themselves by pushing debunked conspiracy theories. Now, the left in this country has become so unhinged about the Trump-Russia collusion conspiracy that doesn't exist that at today's hearing, Senator Tom Cotton, he decided to call it out for what it really is, a fantasy, and something that you'd only read about in a Tom Clancy spy novel. Take a look at this.
Mr. Sessions, are you familiar with what spies called tradecraft?
A little bit.
That involves things like covert communications and dead drops and brush passes, right?
That is part of it.
Do you like spy fiction? John le Carré, Daniel Silva, Jason Matthews?
Yeah, Alan First. David Ignatius. Just finished Ignatius's book.
Do you like Jason Bourne or James Bond movies? Have you ever, in any of these fantastical situations, heard of a plot line so ridiculous that a sitting United States senator and an ambassador of a foreign government colluded at an open setting with hundreds of other people to pull off the greatest caper in the history of espionage.
By the way, I happen to love Bourne and Bond movies. All right, but in all seriousness, Senator Cotton absolutely nailed it here, and he deserves a lot of credit for calling out these Democrats and, of course, the Destroy Trump media's lies about what's really going on here. This has now become nothing more than a witch hunt, plain and simple. And there's another massive part of this story that involves actual scandals, actual crimes that have been committed that they're ignoring, something the Destroy Trump media refuses to tell you about. We'll tell you here on this show. Let's start with the leader of this political witch hunt. Right now, that would be special counsel Robert Mueller, who should be closing up shop. One, he has stunning conflicts of interest, like the fact he's known James Comey for years. They're good friends. In fact, Comey testified that the reason he had a friend leak a memo, which we believe is illegal, to the New York Times was to bring about the appointment of a special counsel. And big surprise, it ended up being Robert Mueller. And Fox News previously reported Comey's testimony last week was, quote, closely coordinated with the special counsel. So think about this for a minute. You have a disgruntled former fired employee in James Comey, clearly spiteful, clearly angry, out for revenge, and now one of his closest personal friends is now leading the investigation into President Trump, who Comey is accusing of wrongdoing. There is no way that this investigation could be fair or objective. It is now impossible. So who do you think Mueller is going to side with? His friend or the president? A friend, by the way, that he's going after. His friend is going after. This is a massive conflict of interest. It cannot be ignored. And that's why our colleague and friend Greg Jarrett here at the Fox News Channel, who will join us later in the program, is calling it all out. And according to Greg, Comey and Mueller's relationship may violate two federal laws. Here's the first one. And by the way, we'll just read the header, 28 CFR 452 or 45.2, disqualification arising from personal or political relationship. Now, that's what we're describing with Comey and Mueller's relationship. And here's the next law, 28 CFR 600.7, conduct and accountability. Now, this says that the Attorney General can fire a special counsel if he or she has a conflict of interest. But that's not all. It gets even worse and more outrageous. Several outlets have reported that three key people on Mueller's investigation team have actually donated to the Democrats. Now, that's why we tonight are calling for this special counsel to be shut down. And by the way, that brings us to the real scandal that has been completely ignored by the media, by the Democrats. And the fact is this: the former Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, tried to obstruct justice by interfering in the FBI's Clinton email server investigation. Now, here's how James Comey described it last week in front of this very same committee. Take a look.
The Clinton campaign at the time was using all kinds of euphemisms, security review, matters, things like that for what was going on. We were getting to a place where the Attorney General and I were both going to have to testify and talk publicly about it. And I wanted to know, was she going to authorize us to confirm we had an investigation? And she said, yes, but don't call it that, call it a matter. And I said, why would I do that? And she said, just call it a matter.
Wow. Add that to, of course, the tarmac meeting with Loretta Lynch and Bill Clinton and much more. This is the real scandal here tonight, and it's only getting bigger. Circuit News' Sarah Carter, who will also be with us later tonight, she's been blowing this scandal wide open along with her colleague John Solomon. Now take a look at this headline. Comey got steely silence after confronting Loretta Lynch about Clinton's email probe. Now, according to Sarah's report, James Comey actually confronted Loretta Lynch over attempts to influence the Clinton probe. Now, if Robert Mueller wants to investigate real obstruction of justice, then he should be looking into Loretta Lynch and what she did. And if Democrats, if they want to talk about collusion, since their conspiracy theories about President Trump have now been completely debunked, then let's talk about Hillary Clinton colluding with Vladimir Putin, the Uranium One deal. And remember, she signed off as Secretary of State, handing over 20% of America's uranium to Putin and the Russians, of course, the foundational material to make a nuclear weapon. And while people, by the way, all involved in this deal, they were donating big bucks to the Clinton Foundation. And her husband, Bill Clinton, well, he was doubling his speaking fees in Moscow. Now, the propaganda media has completely gotten this wrong, and they're backwards. They've absolutely hit a new low. They're the worst. And as we have explained right here on this program, there are 5 forces now working to take down President Trump. This is a real, clear, present danger to the president you elected last November. First, of course, and I think the most dangerous, the deep state. Those selectively leaking information to damage the president. By the way, kind of like James Comey did. Second, the Destroy Trump media, a bunch of tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists caught red-handed, colluding with the Clinton campaign as WikiLeaks revealed. Also, of course, you got the unhinged Democrats, a bunch of sore losers, obstructionists at this point, who, by the way, are just bitter about the election. They never got over the fact that Donald Trump won. And, of course, sorry to say it, you got weak, spineless Republicans, no backbone, never supported Donald Trump to begin with. And, by the way, and then you got the whole never-Trumper crowd. They want relevance. They want vindication. They want to see the president fail so they can say, see, we told you so. But this has now become a serious moment of truth for the United States of America. We're either going to lose to these forces and allow them to distract this president from getting people off of poverty, out of food stamps, and back in the labor force, buying homes, the president and the agenda you elected him to enact, or we can stop it right now, what they're trying to do to this man, because they don't want his success. Their success, his success is their failure. To do this, James Comey and Loretta Lynch need to be investigated. Robert Mueller needs to go. And with all due respect, it's time for Hillary Clinton to be prosecuted. Joining us now.
Are these leaks serious threats to our national security, and is the Department of Justice taking them with the appropriate degree of seriousness in investigating and ultimately going to prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law?
Thank you, Senator Cotton. We have had one successful case very recently in Georgia. That person has been denied bail, I believe, and is being held in custody. But some of these leaks, as you well know, are extraordinarily damaging to the United States security. And we have got to restore a regular order principle. We cannot have persons in our intelligence agencies, our investigative agencies, or in Congress leaking sensitive matters.
All right, that was the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, earlier today, stressing just how dangerous, how damaging the leaks are, the selective leaks out of Washington for the security of this country. We continue now with former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. By the way, his brand new book out. It is in bookstores everywhere as of tonight, and, of course, on Amazon.com, Hannity.com, Understanding Trump. You know, Mr. President, I think about what you just heard there, and the president's attorney mentioned that this week, the selective leaks to damage the president. To me, if the Obama holdovers aren't removed now, if the deep state, those that have been leaking, aren't dealt with and prosecuted now, and the Attorney General mentioned just one prosecution, but there are others, and I think at a much higher level. To me, they got a minnow, and they really need to get the great whites. I don't think this ever ends for the president, and he doesn't get the. Well, I'm glad I could make you. I'm glad I could make you laugh. You like a very colorful analogy. Well, no, but if we don't get these top people, it's dangerous.
Look, but let me be clear. This is not about the president or getting the president. I agree with General Kelly, the Secretary of Homeland Security, who said about a week ago, many of these verge on treason. I mean, this is about the survival and the safety of the United States of America and the people of the United States. I don't care if you're pro-Trump or you're anti-Trump. There is no excuse for people taking on themselves the right to take secrets and release them. And candidly, there's no excuse for the news media picking them up and printing them. We've gotten into this entire cycle of, I think, unpatriotic behavior in which people are utterly irresponsible. And I think they should be prosecuted. I think it should be aggressive and vigorous. And I frankly think, for example, everybody in the White House should have to go through a session on what the secrecy laws are. I think all new political appointees should have to go through a session on what the secrecy laws are and what the consequences will be if you violate them.
You know, we know crimes were committed. One was committed against General Flynn in a violation of the Espionage Act. We know these leaks, with all of this raw intelligence, they're all illegal acts. And I'm looking at Robert Mueller, and I see similarities to Patrick Fitzgerald, who knew on day one it was Richard Armitage. What did that go on for 3 years? Here Mueller knows today there's no obstruction. Here he knows today the president was not involved in collusion. Here he knows today that he wasn't being investigated. And he's hiring all of these Obama, Clinton supporters, donors, and even Clinton's attorney to go after the president. This is bad.
And remember who appoints Fitzpatrick. It's James Comey, who at that time was an assistant attorney general. And he knows when he does it. He knows that Richard Armitage of the State Department was the leak. He knows that none of it was illegal. There was no crime involved. And he appoints Fitzpatrick anyway. Fitzpatrick then says to Armitage, be quiet. And he goes after Dick Cheney's chief of staff, Scooter Libby, because what he wants to do is coerce Libby into turning on the vice president. And Libby, who's an honorable man, refuses to do so. That's why I worry about the team that Mueller's assembling. I don't think they're going to get Trump, but I think they're going to get other people, because when you're involved in this kind of criminal investigation, people who have the power of the government can set you up for all sorts of secondary charges and can ruin your life and can bankrupt you hiring lawyers. And I think this is a bad deal.
This is a bad deal. I think there's great danger here. There's also investigative creep, as we call it. He starts out investigating one thing. It goes on for 3 years. He ends up with somebody falling into a perjury trap because they didn't remember. They made a mistake. Nobody gets to revise and extend their remarks, if you will. So the question is, what do Republicans do now, knowing there's no obstruction, knowing there's no collusion? Shouldn't this be shut down?
Look, I think the two intelligence committees have an easy task. You bring in Mueller, and you say to him, how often did you talk with Comey? How often did you swap information with Comey? Did you review Comey's testimony before he gave it? How many of Comey's various memos did you get out of regular order? I mean, I think you start with this whole question. I was initially in favor of Mueller, and given his past record, I tweeted favorable things. But the minute Comey explained with enormous arrogance that he had deliberately leaked a memo for the purpose of forcing a special counsel who just happens to be his close friend, from that minute on, I thought, the fix is in and this is really sick.
At least a few senators seem fed up with the absurdity of the never-ending Russia investigation. Today, Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas asked if this whole affair could be a plausible plot for a spy movie. Watch.
Do you like spy fiction? Have you ever, in any of these fantastical situations, heard of a plot line so ridiculous that a sitting United States senator and an ambassador of a foreign government colluded at an open setting with hundreds of other people to pull off the greatest caper in the history of espionage?
Thank you for saying that, Senator Cotton. It's just like through the looking glass. I mean, what is this?
Tammy Bruce may or may not be a Russian agent. She is a radio host for sure, and she joins us tonight. Hey, Tammy Bruce, what is this about?
You know, with that, I was just worried that the next thing was going to be Boris and Natasha and Bullwinkle hanging out at the Mayflower. You know, it's a cartoon. It's cartoonish at this point. And clearly, this is a dynamic where even at Hillary's I Lost party right after the election, she said it was the Russians. These are individuals who are desperate to not have to admit to blowing $1 billion, to failing everyone, to being this out of touch with the American people. So they have to find another reason for it. It is an actual construct made up of nothing. Now, they hope that it will continue on for 4 more years or perhaps for 8. This is what they do. It's what they do best. The media is helping move it along, even though, of course, it's false. And this is why this conversation, the Internet, is important for us to be able to point out the nature of what's really going on here. And thank goodness for Jeff Sessions, an extraordinary man. He did a great job tonight. And remember, he chose to be there. He chose the time. He insisted on coming in part to clear his name. One question I have, Tucker, is James Comey also has accused Loretta Lynch effectively of obstruction, one could argue, and she's been silent. She has not come out and said, wait a minute, I want to go and testify under oath and clear my name. But it was the first thing Jeff Sessions wanted to do. I think Loretta Lynch should come forward, and if not, she should be asked to come forward at this point.
Yeah, I don't think there are New York Times reporters camped outside her house right now demanding an explanation. How reckless is it, though? I mean, I understand the nature of political attacks. I've certainly seen and covered a lot of them. But when you involve an actual country that is an actual player in global affairs that we have to deal with on an actual level, like Russia, it distorts all of American foreign policy.
It does, but what it also does, it's interesting. What do they say? Is the best defense is a good offense, right? There's also a lot of connections with the Clintons and Russia and with the Democrats in that framework. It's an interesting situation where if you want to protect questions that might be coming over at your angle, you're going to project it onto someone else as well. And then you've also got, of course, the Romney explanation in the last election where he said, you know, Russia's our greatest geopolitical foe. It's true. Russia can do tremendous damage to us, and I think that's also convenient as a nation we don't know much about, as a nation where it's easy to frighten the American people. But the Democrats, as usual, of course, underestimate our ability to ask questions and to really understand what's going on. 6 out of 10 Americans, by the way, a new Quinnipiac poll found that they're angry with the media because of the nature of the coverage of politics, and a lot of that, of course, is simply carrying the water for the Democrats.
It is. I saw someone on another channel recently say, you know, anyone who complains about leaks from government is in effect putting up a smokescreen to defend Donald Trump. And I guess I would say it's a real concern. If your intelligence agencies, whom you trust to gather information on American citizens, are misusing that information for political ends, like, what's scarier than that? Why is that not scarier than anything Russia tried to do?
And look, we already saw the damage when it came to leaks about the London Bridge attack, and that caused an immediate diplomatic problem. The fact is, with James Comey, the question is, you know, leaks are like potato chips. You don't do just one. What else was he leaking, and what damage did it do? The same with that reality winner. They're still looking for that thumb drive. So when people tend to do this, they tend to do it in a big way. And, of course, the damage then gets multiplied.
Leaks are like potato chips. I'm remembering that. Tammy
There you
Bruce,
go.
thanks a million.
Thanks, Tucker.
And this is Fox News. We are following breaking news tonight. A massive fire in a high-rise out of London. Firefighters struggling to contain that blaze that is now engulfed this major residential building. And I guess now with more is Fox News correspondent at large, Geraldo Rivera. Geraldo, we can't not comment. I'm looking at the scene tonight, and it is one of the worst high-rise fires I think I have ever seen. And wow, what a job the firefighters in London have. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the people there. That looks devastating.
At least 40 fire trucks are on the scene there, Sean. It's called the Grenfell Tower. It's variously described as 24 to 27 stories. The fire started on one side, but now it's engulfed the entire, that whole building, as you can clearly see, and it's spreading through the block. There are hundreds of people on the street outside. The police are trying to move the crowds away to let the ambulances drive through. No word on what started this blaze. Obviously, it's not under control yet. We have no...
You know what's scary, Geraldo? Look at every single level of that apartment complex is now on fire. Engulfed. You've got to pray nobody's in that building right now.
Well, one of the reports says that there were people with flashlights up top early on. Hopefully they were evacuated. There are helicopters overhead. So obviously the information is preliminary, but the audience at home can see that this is an unprecedented blaze. I mean, the temperature generated by that thing, every floor.
Every single floor.
You wonder what it was made of, but, we don't know
everybody gets out of there.
Any indication of criminal activity or casualties yet, but we're watching.
Sure, he's pretty much happy at the fact that I'm over here trying to accomplish something that we both need. Me to go over there and do one thing to make this happen, it says a lot. For him to like me it says a lot. For him to open his heart and his mind to give me his daughter for the first time in history, I hold his kid. Really?
Potato-faced actor Mark Ruffalo is demanding MSNBC stop hiring white people. He actually tweeted a petition saying, tell MSNBC, NBC News to stop the white conservative hiring spree. The petition implores, quote, don't promote right-wing hate. How cowardly to cast divergent opinion as hateful. I guess they know their lefty dribble can't compete, so they smear other voices as evil to eliminate actual diversity of ideas. So who are these hateful people that this network is hiring? George Will, Nicole Wallace,
Oh my gosh.
Greta. Yeah, real outright goons. If only Mark had the guts to focus on the violent fascists on his side, the scum who throw urine at young women at protests, who stab police horses, who demand days to celebrate racism. That's your people, Marco. Look, Mark's not that bright, so he masks his insecurities in social justice tantrums. But isn't it time to ask Hollywood to stop hiring white actors like him? Seriously, why doesn't Ruffalo accelerate diversity by rejecting roles and allow people of color to replace him? This guy's been in like 70 movies. Ruffalo's own selfish desire to saturate the marketplace makes him an obstacle for diversity. He's racist. In fact, all those roles were opportunities for gays, lesbians, men and women of color that he took for himself. His callous appropriation of such roles deprived others of meaningful work. He's a selfish old white male, and Hollywood should stop hiring him. I would circulate a petition, but unlike Marco, I have a life. Shouldn't he live by the sword, die by the sword, Dana?
It was a great suggestion.
Yes.
I actually might be like wearing a hair shirt tonight saying, you know what, Greg Gutfeld's right. He probably hadn't realized this about himself.
Yes, exactly. If you actually feel that there are too many white people in a certain occupation, Mark, it's on you. He's in like 5 movies a year, Jesse. He doesn't need to work that much. And every role he takes means a person of color doesn't get that role. He played the Hulk. He didn't have to be a white guy to play the Hulk.
That's a lot of roles for a potato face, Greg.
Yes, well,
I mean, wow, that's mean. I cannot believe you said he was potato face.
No, that's a compliment. I like potatoes. I like potatoes. I'm a spud king.
You know what I like? I like when the left eats its own. That's what I really enjoy. Could you imagine if a conservative Hollywood actor said, Fox News, we have to stop hiring so many liberal blacks. Could you imagine the outrage about something like that? It's crazy.
Yeah.
Juan would be outraged.
If MSNBC, that's too conservative for Mark Ruffalo.
I know,
that's
exactly.
Too conservative.
Exactly.
Juan's Panamanian.
Yeah, in fact, when we were talking about potato face, I was reminded that Manuel Noriega was called pineapple face.
Yeah, that's an interesting expression.
I don't understand how this green guy suddenly gets into this racial conversation. But I will say that there is a legitimate conversation going on about the fact that you have people like Tamron Hall no longer working there, or Melissa Harris Perry, Michael Eric Dyson, and it seems like, hey, what's going on? Are they making a decision to move away from the left and move towards a more centrist approach?
Well, they made it very hard on Megyn Kelly when she moved over there because the press and the media, because Tamron Hall then went off the air, but they weren't going to keep Tamron anyway.
Right, but people like Jose Diaz-Balart, Tamron Hall, Toure.
I've never heard of these people.
You never get out of here. You have.
You know Toure.
What is this MSNBC you speak of?
Well, Toure was on CNN, the show, remember?
I kind of, that cycle. What's it called, the cycle?
Yeah, we're trying to imitate us.
They're trying to imitate the Five.
It
worked out well.
With Crystal Ball.
Yeah, exactly.
Was she on that show?
It's like a child dressing up as a cowboy on Halloween. You're not really a cowboy.
But she's on here now.
Who?
Yeah, crystal ball. We like crystal ball.
But this is an
Look into the
example,
future.
Kimberly, of a person who doesn't want any opposing views. He doesn't realize it could make him stronger.
Let me tell you something. This is part of it bigger. Get some elevation on this, if you will. Get up on a step ladder or something. Here's the thing. If you,
a personal insult.
I did not deserve that.
Wow.
The show is over.
It's
we have a minute
over.
left.
Wait a minute left. But when you think about it, the discrimination and prejudice that is being exhibited by the alt-left, it's unbelievable. If you don't disagree with them, then everybody else is racist and sexist, and they get to preach and pontificate and exclude others from college campuses and from speaking venues and from whatever events they're having, et cetera, because it's what they decide has the purity and the moral objective. That's what I find extremely limited and small-minded.
Well, the other thing I think that MSNBC has decided is that in terms of, not on racial diversity, but they've realized that diversity of thought is actually good for their bottom line. I think they've made a marketing and a business decision.
Yeah, people like to be challenged. They like to hear new things. That's why The Five is the most successful show in the history of television.
Exhilarating.
There's been nothing like this.
We can
Except
go
the cycle.
Right.
Except the cycle.
Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. The Attorney General of the United States, Jeff Sessions, testified today before the Senate Intelligence Committee and, as expected, strongly denied that he has had secret or improper interactions with the Russian government.
The suggestion that I participated in any collusion, that I was aware of any collusion with the Russian government to hurt this country, which I have served with honor for 35 years, or to undermine the integrity of our democratic process, is an appalling and detestable lie.
Well, that's what he claims. It's always possible that a high-level Russian defector will appear sometime in the future with documents proving that Jeff Sessions is, in fact, a foreign agent, perhaps of a sleeper cell sent to Alabama during the Cold War and activated at Vladimir Putin's request during the last election. That would be a game-changer. Otherwise, the Russia conspiracy seemed to hit a cul-de-sac this afternoon in the Senate. But that doesn't mean there are no scandals for Congress to investigate. Here's one, maybe the biggest one of all. Our intel services are corrupt, and they're politicized, and they're making it very hard to run the U.S. government. And that may be the point, since they'd clearly like to run it themselves, and they are to some extent. Does that sound like overstatement? Well, consider how much of American politics now revolves around information that's been strategically, often misleadingly and illegally released for political effects. The hearings you watched today are just one example. They took place in part because former FBI Director Jim Comey told senators last week that Sessions may have met Russian Ambassador Kislyak at the Mayflower Hotel in Washington last April. Now, why would Comey think that? Because classified surveillance of Kislyak's conversation suggested it may have happened. That was surveillance released in order to hurt Jeff Sessions, and that, by the way, was apparently false. There are many more examples of this, every day practically. In December, unnamed intelligence sources told the Washington Post that Russia helped Donald Trump win the presidency. A week later, unnamed senior intelligence officials told NBC News that Putin personally was involved in helping Trump win. In February, current and former American officials released the details of a phone call between incoming National Security Advisor Mike Flynn and Ambassador Kislyak of Russia. That call was monitored because Kislyak was being spied on. Flynn's name should have been concealed, of course, but it wasn't. It was unmasked and then leaked, and his career and reputation were subsequently destroyed by all that. Trump's private phone call with the president of Mexico, surveilled by American intelligence and then leaked. His call with the Australian Prime Minister, same thing. With Vladimir Putin, again, leaked by the intel community. How could this possibly have advanced American national security interests, which is what they're supposed to be doing? None of it did. It was entirely political. And then in March, as if to prove this point, a half-dozen current and former intel officials told the New York Times how they'd sought to spread classified intelligence information about the Trump campaign as widely as possible throughout government to ensure it would all eventually leak. Now, leaks are as old as government, and sometimes they are welcome. In general, the public ought to know a lot more about government than it does. But we're seeing something new at work here. These are not leaks from political appointees, the kind that form the basis of Bob Woodward's books, the kind we benefit from in journalism a lot. These are strategic leaks, the release of classified intelligence from people whose job it is to collect and safeguard that intelligence. And in that way, it's an utter perversion of the system. We give enormous power to our intelligence agencies, CIA, NSA, the rest of them. We let them listen to our phone calls, read our email, watch us from satellites. We let them do that so they can keep us safe from foreign threats, not so they can pick our political leaders or devise our policies. We have elections to do those things. In a democracy, we're in charge, not them, not unelected bureaucrats. That's changing, and we ought to be worried about that change. But Congress isn't worried because a lot of people there would rather have the policies they prefer than constitutional government. That is worse than immoral. It's a mistake. Once the bureaucracy has shoved aside an elected government, they can easily do it again. And at that point, it's over. Democracy is dead.
In our panel early, Byron York, chief political correspondent of the Washington Examiner, editor-in-chief of LifeZette, Laura Ingraham, Olivier Knox, Yahoo News chief Washington correspondent, and Michael Crowley, senior foreign affairs correspondent for Politico. Michael, your thoughts on this hearing?
Well, you know, Jeff Sessions brought some passion and personality to it. I think he made, Jim Comey was a credible witness, and Sessions seems credible when he's expressing this outrage and indignation at what he's been accused of. I think that what was more and so I think he was effective in those moments. I think what was more problematic for him was trying to square the circle as to why he couldn't discuss his conversations with President Trump. I mean, the Russia story now is on two parallel tracks. The really important one is, was there some kind of collusion? What was the nature of Russian influence in this campaign? The second one is, how has President Trump and the people around him, how have they handled this since they took power in the administration? Has there been any attempt to obstruct justice? What was going on with the firing of Jim Comey? Sessions wouldn't talk about his conversations with the president, but he would not say that the president has invoked executive privilege. He cited essentially traditions that he couldn't really specify and said he didn't want to step on the president's future ability to invoke executive privilege. That led one Democrat to say that he was obstructing the investigation, and it seemed to me that Sessions did not have quite as good answers on that front. That was awkward for him.
Laura, one of the things they point to was Admiral Rogers with the NSA. You had Director of National Intelligence. Similar answers and similar frustration from Senate Democrats on this committee about the answers.
This is a tension among the branches of government that's been with us almost since the founding of the Republic. There's always this interest that Congress has to get more information from the executive branch. You saw this play out repeatedly in the Obama administration, going back to 2008. Remember when Desiree Rogers, it's a bit blast from the past, remember when Desiree Rogers, the social secretary, and she botched the handling of the security at the White House? Well, Congress wanted her to testify. She's the social secretary. How did these two socialites get into the White House? The Obama administration came forward and said, no, we're not going to offer her up to testify. There's no reason for it. And they cite confidentiality.
Not executive privilege.
Not executive privilege, but the need for there to be, the senior staff has to be able to deal with the president and deal with these matters on the basis of this general idea of confidentiality. However, the courts on this have been clear that executive privilege, if that's cited, is not absolute. And number two, on the issue of confidentiality, separation of powers, which is what Jeff Sessions claimed today, it always has to be weighed against the other branches of government needing to know, needing to have their appropriate constitutional checks and balances. But the fact that Jeff Sessions made this claim, contrary to what I'm hearing on some of these other networks, that this is some novel legal concept, it is not. In fact, it was cited repeatedly by Ben Rhodes at the Obama administration when they refused to testify at all. Jeff Sessions comes and testifies, and you could say, well, because he's testifying, he has to say everything. I don't think that's established at all as a legal matter.
Byron, back to the 30,000-foot look at this hearing. You could see by the fiery exchanges and maybe his opening statement why the Attorney General decided to testify publicly.
He did. I think he felt wronged by the Comey testimony of last week, wanted to set things straight. I think he was very strong on this question of this alleged meeting with the Russian ambassador Kislyak at the Mayflower Hotel last April. Trump comes to Washington, gives his first big foreign policy speech, and a number of ambassadors, including Kislyak, are there. And there's this idea that he had a meeting. He said there was just no meeting. Maybe we said, hi, how are you doing? Nice day. But there was simply no meeting. He also pushed back very hard, and Catherine played that, against this idea that Comey gave that there was maybe some sort of hush-hush bad stuff about Jeff Sessions that Comey knew about, but he couldn't tell anybody. He said there's nothing there. There's absolutely nothing there. I think he was pretty strong, giving his reasons for recusal, and also said that he had basically effectively recused himself from day one at the Justice Department, not taking part in any substantive roles. But I did think what we saw about halfway through the hearing was Democrats really began to get traction on this. You're keeping something from us. You're hiding something from us in what you're telling the president. And Heinrich and King and Harris, the three Democratic senators, really pushed this hard. And so far, the administration has not given a good answer in terms of precedents that they can cite for this being withheld.
Here's one of those exchanges with Senator Dianne Feinstein.
Did you ever discuss Director Comey's FBI handling of the Russia investigations with the president or anyone else?
Senator Feinstein, that would call for a communication between the Attorney General and the President, and I'm not able to comment on that.
You are not able to answer the question here, whether you ever discussed that with him?
That's correct.
That's correct. Olivia.
Well, when he was asked whether he'd ever discussed alleged Russian meddling with candidate Trump, he said he couldn't recall. When he was prompted on whether he'd ever gotten a briefing about the alleged Russian meddling since he became Attorney General, he said no. He said everything he knew from the papers. I think there's a lot of room here for at least one more round of questioning of Jeff Sessions. There are a lot of things that he said that I think Democrats are going to want to circle back on. He's not sure why Donald Trump fired Jim Comey. And then he struggled a little bit to explain what happened in his confirmation hearings when he denied flatly meeting with Russian officials, both in spoken testimony and in a letter to Senator Patrick Leahy. I think there's probably a lot of room for Democrats to circle back and ask some more questions.
But as far as the first track on the collusion, we did not learn anything in this hearing other than he firmly does not know, says he doesn't see, doesn't hear, didn't know.
Didn't hear, didn't know. No one brought forward new information. He had an exchange with Tom Cotton where they essentially ridiculed the idea that a plot like this could be possible, and particularly that it could unfold in part at a reception at the Mayflower Hotel. I think some Democrats felt like that was setting a high bar. Cotton said something like, you know, even in a Hollywood movie it wouldn't happen this way. And you know, some Democrats were saying it's not that simple. You guys are setting too high a bar. But no new information and basically a strong pushback on that substantive question. But again, there's a second track here.
No, agreed.
Woe betide the Trump White House. How did they respond to this storyline? And that's the thing we didn't hear much about.
I should point out that there are two panelists at this table who were at that reception at the Mayflower. You and Byron.
It could be part of the whole plot.
It could be at the speech.
I spoke to Ambassador Kislyak. I quoted him in a story, so no one's contacted me about it. But it's a small calling card, I guess, for a few nights.
Should be a subpoena.
When I feel when people talk about having discussions with, like when you're like, did you have a discussion with? If someone says hi, or is like, hey, how you, is that a discussion? I think you got to go back to the other question here: the desire for Sessions to come to Congress. There are other people who refuse to testify before Congress. Susan Rice is one of them. Now, why isn't she not testifying? Is she going to claim some confidentiality? Because you know the Republicans would ask, did you have any conversations with Barack Obama or any other senior staff about unmasking names, identities? What would she cite? Would she cite executive privilege? If she didn't, would she cite confidentiality or separation of powers? I imagine she would, and I imagine the Democrats would have no problem with it.
That's the other nugget I wanted to pull out. He did confirm the existence of multiple probes into leaks of information out of the administration, and said that some people would probably be sorry that they leaked. I think that that's the first time we've had ironclad confirmation from DOJ about the existence of those investigations.
But I do think he's hesitant to talk fully about his interactions with the president, in part because there's so much he doesn't know. He'll say, well, I recommended that Director Comey be dismissed because of his handling of the Clinton matter. And the senator says, yeah, but what did President Trump say about that or think about that? And Sessions' answer, his honest answer is, I don't know.
Right.
I mean, why did Donald Trump do this?
Look what he told Lester Holt on NBC, so something different.
Yeah.
Panel, thank you. We'll